And joining us, Senator Dan Sullivan, a Republican of Alaska, it says here. You're a Republican of Alaska, Senator. Anyway, you are. That is your party, and you are from that state. It's among the larger oil-producing states in the United States, and obviously you're dealing with this and other things as well. Senator, can we start just with your view of the Phase 3 legislation that you voted for, and I guess implementing it effectively and quickly is something that we need to do, and we can't just take that for granted.
Sure, Joe. You're exactly right. And what we were able to do here in the Senate, 96-0, by the way, was pass a very important piece of legislation bringing liquidity to small businesses, the broader market, help to American families, a surge of resources for our hospitals and frontline workers in the healthcare profession. But you're right. This bill isn't going to be perfect. There's going to be mistakes in it. The key now is implementation. Every minute, every hour counts. Literally, lives are at stake. So I'm working with the Treasury Department, Small Business Association, and others to make sure it's implemented well and as quickly as possible to get these resources to Americans in my state, all over the country. Everybody needs it.
The Phase 4, is that something to consider, or infrastructure? We heard the president talking about zero infrastructure. Would you make sure that it's focused on completing Phase 3 in terms of implementation, or do you think we should be thinking about the next phase at this point?
So, look, I actually had a good chat with the president just a couple days ago about Phase 4 and, in particular, the infrastructure component. I think we in the Senate should start working on that. No offense to the Speaker of the House, but I don't think she should have the pen on this. I think one of the reasons the CARES Act moved quickly in a bipartisan way is because we wrote it here in the Senate. We should do that on Phase 4. It should include, things that we'll have to fix part of Phase 3. There's no doubt there's going to be mistakes, people who weren't covered, but it should include infrastructure. The president is very supportive of that. It should also include this issue of bringing back manufacturing and our supply chains back to this country. That's a very bipartisan issue right now. We're recognizing how vulnerable we are with pharmaceuticals or medical supplies. And even these issues, this issue being floated about, war bonds, things like a virus bond, that all Americans are going to have a role to play. If we can do things like that, I think there's a lot of bipartisan support to get going on this. I've talked to a number of Republican and Democratic senators, but I think we should start moving on it, and I'm certainly supportive of that.
What can you tell us about one of your great industries up in Alaska, the energy industry? What can you tell us about how the industry is responding to this in your state, and efforts maybe to put a floor on this with the Saudis and some type of alliance with the Saudis that I think at this point is on the back burner, suggested by the White House, but at this point, I guess we've got a lot of other things we're focusing on. What's the state of things?
Well, look, you talked about the demand shock with regard to the markets because of the energy markets because of the pandemic, but the Saudis have really brought in a supply shock at exactly the wrong time. I think these kind of crises really kind of make it clear who your friends and who aren't your friends, who your friends are and who aren't your friends. I've led an effort with a number of U.S. senators. 13 of us wrote the Crown Prince. We then followed up with a conference call meeting with the ambassador. And, this was a really frank discussion that I essentially said, look, the entire strategic relationship from my perspective, which I've been a supporter of, all the senators who are on that letter, on that conference call with the ambassador, have been strong supporters of the U.S.-Saudi relationship. That is going to change if the Saudis don't start playing a more constructive role with regard to energy markets, particularly when our country, my constituents all over the country need that support. This isn't just an economic issue, an energy issue. Joe, it's a national security issue with regard to the importance of our energy sector. And, one of the things I said to the ambassador is, we've been there for you. First Gulf War, Saddam Hussein's getting ready to roll through your country. It wasn't the Saudi military that stopped him. They're actually quite weak. It was the 1st Marine Division, the 82nd Airborne. Americans died in that war, and they need to step up or the strategic relationship's going to change. Senator Kramer of North Dakota and I have a bill to remove troops, all of our troops, all of our anti-missile defense systems from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. That bill will pass. So we're not bluffing here. If they don't start playing a more constructive role, you're going to see, I think, a break in the long-term strategic relationship. The choice is going to be up to the Saudis, but they must start playing a more constructive role, or we're going to bring a lot of our leverage in the U.S. Senate and the Congress to bear on this relationship.
Hey, Senator, you're, I see where you're standing, and you're in D.C. Do you think we need to make provisions for more virtual government at this point? How are you feeling about your safety? And the age of the average senator probably puts a lot of those people in a high risk group for coronavirus. What do you think we ought to do about that? Do you feel safe? Do your colleagues feel safe?
Look, I mean, as you saw, you may have heard one of my colleagues, Rand Paul, has tested positive. There's a number of members of the House who have tested positive. But I think, in many ways, I think our duty station is here. The governors across the country are doing a good job. When we voted on the CARES Act, I went to the floor at the very end after that vote and made some remarks saying, look, the one thing we know about this issue, it's changing minute by minute, hour by hour. The Senate needs to be ready to respond. So I think, there are a lot more people in America, our frontline healthcare workers, who are a lot more at risk than we are here in the Congress. The Congress, in my view, needs to be here ready, not going home for a month. The American people need to see us ready to take more action. But I do think we need to consider things like, in an emergency situation, some kind of remote voting wouldn't last long. I know it would undermine certain traditions, long-standing traditions in the Senate, but Senator Portman, Senator Durbin have a bill that would do this. I'm a co-sponsor of that bill. So, yes, I think we need to think about that, but I think we need to show the American people that we are here ready for action, not on recess for a month, when the whole country is dealing with one of the biggest, most unprecedented crises we've had since our founding.
I can imagine that Alaska, I don't know if it's a false sense of security, but vast distances. How is it different for what the governor of Alaska is trying to affect there in terms of a virus spread? I guess it doesn't get warm enough to. That's one of the things we're all waiting for down here in the lower 48, or I don't know whether you count Hawaii, but warmer weather is going to help. I imagine if it was in Alaska, you don't have that benefit, but it seems like the population is so low, it's the opposite of New York City, I would think. What's the state right now?
Well, look, I would say, every state has its own unique challenges. Our governor, his team, they're doing a good job. Our delegation, congressional delegation, we're working hand in glove with our elected leaders. What I like to say, one team, one fight. That's what we call it in the Marine Corps. That's what we're doing in Alaska. That's what we're really doing as a nation, I think, overall. But, we have our own challenges in Alaska. Every state's been dealing with these issues of challenges on equipment, and we're starting to get cases. We've had a few deaths already. And, particularly our Alaska Native communities. We have over 200 villages not connected by roads. Those communities have struggled in the past. The Spanish flu over 100 years ago devastated, and I mean devastated, a lot of these communities. So there's some concern there, but Alaskans are pulling together strongly. We had, 2,500 volunteers committed to start sewing masks, things like that. We're very resilient, tough people. So we're going to get through this stronger, tougher, more resilient. But it's going to take a lot of self-sacrifice, whether in Alaska or across our nation. But we're seeing that, and I think that's very heartening.
Senator, thank you. And it's such a pleasure having someone just in front of like a normal camera and where there's no delay and able to talk to you. Thank you for making the effort to get in front of that force, Senator, and hope to see you again soon. And you can update us on the oil situation in the state as well as everything.